The sun blazed high over the pristine courtyard of St. Mary's International Academy, its glass walls glistening with wealth and prestige. The school was where the children of power, money, and influence gathered, a place where designer shoes clicked against marble floors and luxury cars lined the gates. But in the middle of this, polished perfection was a shadow that everyone pretended not to see. The billionaire's daughter, Elena, sat quietly at the edge of the courtyard, her gaze lowered, her hands resting on her lap. Though her father's name carried power and respect across the world, within these walls she was invisible. She was deaf, and in a school where appearances mattered more than hearts, silence became her prison. Students brushed past her as though she didn't exist, as though her inability to hear stripped her of worth. But there was one set of eyes that noticed her. A little black girl named Amara, who came from nothing but carried inside her a heart too big to ignore. She wasn't supposed to belong in this academy. Her scholarship was a miracle born of relentless work, and every day she was reminded she was an outsider. The whispers about her skin, the subtle mockery about her second-hand books, the sideways looks when her mother's beat-up car arrived at the gate. Amara endured it all. And yet, when her eyes fell on Elena's lonely figure, sitting silently while the world turned away, something deep stirred inside her. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the power of noticing those the world ignores, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to this channel. Because what you're about to hear is a story that proves a small act of compassion can rewrite destiny itself. Amara often sat under the big oak tree in the courtyard to eat her simple lunch, while others surrounded themselves with laughter, gossip, and wealth. From there, she watched Elena. Every day, the billionaire's daughter would open her notebook and write. Sometimes her lips would move faintly, as though she were speaking to someone only she could see. The other children, dressed in perfect uniforms and dripping with arrogance, would roll their eyes or laugh when she tried to make gestures. They saw her hands fluttering and dismissed it as nonsense. No one tried to understand, no one cared. But Amara saw pain in Elena's eyes. It wasn't the kind of pain that cried loudly, it was quiet, heavy, and buried. The kind of pain Amara herself knew well, the pain of being different in a world that demanded sameness. One afternoon, while the courtyard was buzzing with chatter and Elena sat as usual, Amara did something bold. She approached. She noticed Elena's eyes widen slightly, as though unsure whether this strange, dark-skinned girl intended kindness or mockery. But Amara only smiled and sat down beside her. For a moment, silence hung heavy between them. Then, Amara began to move her hands. It was clumsy at first. She had learned a little sign language from a community center her mother once took her to. The motions were imperfect, hesitant, like a child stumbling with a new language. But when Elena's eyes lit up, when recognition flashed across her face, Amara knew she had cracked open a door the world had locked shut. Elena lifted her hands and replied with graceful speed, her signs flowing like poetry. Amara understood only half of it, but it was enough. For the first time in years, Elena wasn't speaking into a void. Their secret world began to grow from that day. While the school turned its back, the two girls began weaving a bond deeper than anyone could imagine. Amara stayed after school to learn more signs, practicing late into the night even when her eyes burned with exhaustion. She wanted to give Elena a voice, to tell her without words that she was seen, that she mattered. Slowly, Elena blossomed. Her laughter, though silent, danced in her eyes. She began drawing pictures and writing stories to share with Amara. And in those quiet exchanges, where hands moved and notebooks filled, two lonely souls built a friendship the world could not taint. But life at St. Mary's was never merciful. The other children noticed their closeness and began to sneer. "Done, the scholarship girl and the broken doll," one of the wealthy boys said, loud enough for them to hear. The laughter of others followed like daggers. Elena shrank back into her shell, her hands frozen in her lap, but Amara reached over and squeezed her hand. Her eyes burned with fire. She refused to let them take away what they had built. One day, a turning point arrived. The academy hosted its annual cultural showcase, an event where parents, investors, and the press gathered to watch the talents of the students. Children danced, played instruments, recited poems, and basked in applause. Elena sat in the shadows, excluded once again. No one imagined she had anything to offer. But Amara knew the truth. She had seen Elena's notebook filled with beautiful poems, words that poured from a soul too often dismissed. So, when Amara's name was called to perform, she stepped onto the stage not alone, but holding Elena's hand. The room gasped. Amara walked to the microphone, her small voice trembling but steady. She told the audience there was someone they had all overlooked, someone who had more to say than anyone else in the room if only they cared to listen. And then she stepped aside. Elena walked to the center of the stage, her hands trembling, her heart pounding. The crowd watched, confused. Then her hands began to move. She spoke in signs, her expression alive with emotion, her body flowing with grace. Amara stood beside her, translating each line for the audience. Elena's poem told of silence, of being invisible in a world that worshipped noise. She spoke of loneliness, of aching to be seen. But she also spoke of hope, of a friend who reached through the shadows and said, "On you matter." Her words, carried through Amara's trembling voice, filled the hall like fire. Parents who had come expecting polished recitals, now found themselves wiping away tears. And for the first time, Elena stood not as the billionaire's deaf daughter, but as a voice the world could no longer ignore. When the performance ended, silence fell. Then applause erupted, thunderous, unstoppable, rising like a wave that refused to end. Elena's father, who had always believed his money could shield her from pain but never realized it couldn't give her belonging, stood in the front row with tears streaming down his face. He had given her everything money could buy, but this little black girl had given her something far greater, dignity. After that day, the tide turned. Students who had once mocked began approaching Elena with respect. Teachers who had ignored her now sought ways to include her. The billionaire, humbled by the courage of his daughter and the kindness of Amara, built a new program in the academy to teach sign language and ensure no child was ever silenced again. But more than the applause, more than the programs, what mattered most was the bond that had grown between two girls, who had nothing in common except the scars of being unseen. Amara and Elena became inseparable. They walked together, studied together, dreamed together. Amara's once muted presence in the academy now shone, not because she sought glory but because kindness had lifted her higher than privilege ever could. Elena, once caged by silence, now had a friend who understood her language and her heart. As years passed, the story of that moment spread far beyond the academy. People spoke of the billionaire's daughter and the scholarship girl, of how compassion turned a stage into a revolution, and though time would move on, one truth remained unshakable, that a single act of noticing, of choosing love over indifference, can change not just a life, but the world. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Stories like these remind us that humanity still shines when we choose compassion over cruelty. And before you go, comment down below, "Kindness is power." Let's fill this space with reminders that the smallest acts of love can create the biggest changes.